Welcome friends. Now let us see the amendments in your documentation chapter. Right. When you talk about the first amendment in your documentation chapter, friends, you're talking about section 31 of CGST Act, which talks about tax invoice. For this, you have to understand the background that government on recommendation of GST Council has powers for certain special categories of goods where tax invoice can be raised within such time and manner as may be prescribed, which means for certain special category of goods, government was authorized to give special time limit and special manner of raising invoice. Now the same power has been extended to the government for certain special categories of services. So again, government on recommendation of GST Council maybe by notification specify the categories of services, which means a list of special services where tax invoice can be issued within such time and such manner as may be prescribed. So this amendment is merely equating services with that of goods. So this power was already given to the government with respect to supply of goods, where they can ask for a list of certain special goods, what is the time limit and what is the manner in which tax invoice can be raised. The same powers now has been given to government in respect of certain special category of services which may be notified, where government may tell that tax invoice can be issued within such special time limit and special manner as may be prescribed. So that is only equating both goods as well as services with respect to tax invoice. So that is the first amendment, not so important amendment. Now the second amendment, friends, is again very important amendment. This is with respect to your e-invoicing, which is discussed in rule 48.4, 48.5, 48.6, e-invoicing. Now this amendment, friends, is very crucial or important amendment. So when you talk about e-invoicing, previously e-invoicing was applicable if at all any registered person's previous year turnover, any of the previous year, not one previous year, any of the previous years aggregate turnover right starting from 17-18, turnover was more than 500 crores. Now that 500 crores has been replaced by 50 crores. Now that 500 crores has been replaced by 50 crores. So what it is telling, any registered persons whose aggregate annual turnover in any of the preceding financial year, not one financial year, not just the preceding financial year, any of the preceding financial year, right starting from 17-18 onwards when GST started. Earlier the limit was 500 crores, now they have reduced the limit to 50 crores, which means more and more assessees will be now covered by e-invoicing. So now if their any of the previous year aggregate turnover right starting from 17-18 is more than 50 crores, e-invoicing will be applicable. And friends, e-invoicing is applicable for your B2B supplies and for exports. E-invoicing is basically applicable for B2B invoices, that is registered to registered sales, sales to registered person and exports, right? So now they have reduced that limit. What is that amendment which has come into effect? E-invoicing is applicable if the aggregate turnover of any of the preceding financial year from 17-18 onwards exceeds 50 crores. Earlier it was 500 crores, now they have reduced that limit to 50 crores. So you have to starting from 17-18, you have to see all the previous years. And if in any of the preceding financial years, if in any, not all, if any of the preceding financial years, we are in the financial year 21-22. So if any of the preceding financial year means if in 17-18 or 18-19 or 19-20 or 20-21, if in any of these preceding financial year, any one preceding financial year is sufficient, if your aggregate turnover happens to be more than 50 crores, then e-invoicing will be applicable. And basically e-invoicing is therefore B2B categories and exports categories. That is the amendment there in your rule 48, subrule 4, 5, subrule 5, subrule 6, e-invoicing. And friends, there is a concept called as dynamic QR code, where e-invoicing is not there, you may have dynamic QR code. And basically friends, dynamic QR code is applicable when in your any of the preceding financial year right from 17-18 your aggregate turnover is more than 500 crores. So there it remains at 500 crores, it is not changed. There is an amendment, rather there is a clarification with respect to your dynamic QR code. Dynamic QR code is discussed in 6th proviso to rule 46. 6th proviso to rule 46. It is discussed in 6th proviso to rule 46. Understand that there is no amendment in dynamic QR code, but there are certain clarifications. So if I were to tell the key differences between your e-invoicing and dynamic QR code, Obviously, in the detailed discussion of the chapter, you will find a lot of differences between e-invoicing and dynamic QR code. But now we are discussing only the core differences. Now, when you talk about your e-invoicing, it is applicable for registered persons whose aggregate turnover in any of the preceding financial year, right, starting from 2017-18 is more than 50 crores. Whereas dynamic QR code is applicable where you are talking about your aggregate turnover in any of the preceding financial year, right, starting from 2017-18 is more than 500 crores. So, even earlier it was 500 crores, even now it remains 500 crores. So, there is the limit is different. For earlier, both for e-invoicing as well as dynamic QR code, the limit was 500 crores. Now, for e-invoicing, you have to focus on 50 crores. Whereas for dynamic QR code, you have to focus on 500 crores. As I said, there are a lot of differences between e-invoicing and dynamic QR code, but as of now, we are discussing the key differences. E-invoicing is there for B2B categories plus exports. And dynamic QR code is basically there for sales to unregistered persons, that is B2C, but excluding exports. And friends, that is the first clarification. Whether when you are talking about exports, whether dynamic QR code will be applicable for exports, whether B2C dynamic QR code will be applicable for export invoices, answer is no. For export invoices, you will have e-invoicing, therefore you will not have dynamic QR code. That is, both are not required. Understand that in your e-invoicing, automatically there will be a QR code which will contain invoice reference number. So, there is no need of again dynamic QR code. So, when you talk about export invoices, already your concept of e-invoicing is applicable. Therefore, dynamic QR code is not applicable for export invoices. So, when you talk about your e-invoicing, in terms of your rule 48, sub rule 4, sub rule 5, sub rule 6, it is for B2B plus exports. When you talk about dynamic QR code in respect of your 6th proviso to rule 46, it is applicable for B2C transactions, but other than export, because for exports already you have the concept of e-invoicing. So, that is the first clarification which is that with respect to dynamic QR code. Now, what will be the contents or the details of dynamic QR code? Basically, friends, understand why this dynamic QR code is there. Dynamic QR code is there to enable, supplier should give an option to the recipient to make digital payment. So, as if I am the supplier to whom this dynamic QR code is applicable, as a supplier, I should give an option to the recipient so that he can make the payment by way of digital facilities. But it is not mandatory for the recipient to make the payment by digital ways. So, supplier should give an option to the recipient for making digital payments. Recipient may make the payment by way of the digital facility, or it can make the payment otherwise also. So, it is only the obligation is only on the supplier. I repeat, dynamic QR code is from the angle of supplier. So, when I have B2C transactions other than exports, as a supplier, if at all I am covered by 6th proviso to rule 46, I should give you an option that you can make the digital payments. The facility of digital payment should be open, which should be offered by the supplier, and should be open for the recipient to use it. Now, understand, recipient may use the digital facility for making payment or may not use. That is up to the recipient. Recipient can also pay by way of cash. So, there is no obligation or there is no force on the recipient. Now, again coming back to the clarification, the second clarification is with respect to what shall be the details of this dynamic QR code. So, as a supplier, I should give the recipient the facility to make digital payment. I should offer the facility. Recipient may use it, may not use it, that is not on my control, but I should offer that facility. I also tell that recipient can also make the payment by way of cash. Supplier should give the facility of digital payment to the recipient. Recipient may use that digital facility for making payment or may not use it, that is up to the recipient. There is no force or obligation on the recipient. Now, what are the contents of the dynamic QR code? When the recipient will scan the dynamic QR code, see, whenever you go to shop, the QR code that is scanned is normally static QR code. It will link to the bank account of the supplier, but it will not give you the amount. You have to type the amount. Whereas dynamic QR code will give all these details. The moment it will link to the invoice, dynamic QR code will be connected to invoice. Not only to that particular supplier, it will be connected to the invoice of that supplier. So, it will give the details of supplier's GST number, supplier's UPI ID, supplier's bank account number and IFSC, invoice number and invoice date because it is connected to invoice, total invoice value, GST amount with the breakup whether it is CGST, SGST, IGST or cess. Now, static QR code will always have the above three transactions. So, when you are talking about static QR code, it will have supplier's GST number, supplier's UPI ID, supplier's bank account number and IFSC. So, this is always the content of static QR code. Now, dynamic QR code, in addition to that, dynamic QR code, in addition to the normal transactions, normal QR code that you scan. So, in addition to your supplier's GST number, UPI ID and bank account number and IFSC, it will have the invoice details, that is invoice number and date, invoice value with the breakup of GST also, right. Now this dynamic QR code, you have two options. If at all you are having a POS machine, that is point of sale machine, you can show that dynamic QR code to the recipient will scan it, make the payment, and when you are printing the invoice, you can just write the payment reference number. So, as a supplier, when I am offering this facility to the recipient, for making digital payments, recipient may make the payment by way of digital facility or not, that is up to the recipient. I am offering that facility. If I am covered by 6th proviso to rule 46, what should I do? So, when I am offering that facility to the recipient, I may show this dynamic QR code on POS machines or some software on machine or on systems, on POS machines or on computers, etc. Right, there will be dynamic QR code. Recipient may scan and make the payment. Recipient may scan it and make the payment. If recipient is scanning it and making the payment, this becomes prepayment. I should offer that facility. That is one facility. Or the second facility which I should have on the invoice, on my tax invoice or bill of supply, there should be dynamic QR code. See, either on my system POS machine, I will show that dynamic QR code and ask the recipient to make the payment. If recipient is making the payment, if at all recipient is making the payment, then on my tax invoice, I will write the payment reference number. This is option 1. What is option 1? On my system or POS machine, I will show the dynamic QR code to the recipient. Recipient will make the payment, and on my invoice, I need not print dynamic QR code. I'll just write the payment reference number. Option 2. I'll just give dynamic QR code. I'll just give my tax invoice with dynamic QR code. So, when you talk about option 1, they are telling that if at all payment is made in advance, this option 1 is always there in case of prepayment. So, this circular has got lot of clarifications, and they finally tell if it is a case of prepayment, then always go with option 1. And if it is not a case of prepayment, dynamic QR code on invoice can be there in case of prepayment, that is payment before the invoice is printed, or otherwise, which means if it is a case of prepayment before invoice is printed and if payment is made, even whether I show it on my system or not, if at all it is a case of prepayment, then I can have two options. One, my tax invoice will have a payment reference number, or other, my tax invoice will have dynamic QR code. I can go with any of the option, because when you talk about prepayment, both are possible. If at all payment is received before I take the printout of my invoice, simple. If payment is received before I take the printout of my invoice, that may be a case where advance is received, or I showed the QR code on my system or POS machine and he scanned and make the payment. In any scenario, if it is a case of prepayment, what supplier can do? Supplier can write the payment reference number on the PR and on the in on my tax invoice, or even if it is not willing, he can always go with the normal concept, print the dynamic QR code on the invoice. But if it is otherwise, if at all it is a case of non-prepayment, which means there is no prepayment, then supplier is not having any option, dynamic QR code. It is dynamic QR code. If I were to write this otherwise, the moment you are talking about prepayment, so normally when you talk about prepayment, post-payment, prepayment, post-payment depending on invoice. Prepayment means before raising tax invoice, post-payment is after raising tax invoice. So if it is a case of prepayment, there can be a scenario where I can have tax invoice with payment reference number, or I can have tax invoice with dynamic QR code. I can go otherwise. I can have two options. I can have tax invoice with payment reference number, or I can have tax invoice with dynamic QR code. But if it is post payment, which means after tax invoices that payment is made, I showed the facility, but he is making the payment after I take the printout of tax invoice, then tax invoice should always have dynamic QR code. So in case of prepayment, I have two facilities. I have two options. What are the two options? The first option is tax invoice with PRN, which is more logical. Tax invoice with the same dynamic QR code, which is actually not relevant now because the payment is already made. But if it is post payment, which means after I take the printout of my invoice, then payment is going to be made, then friends, I don't have an option. Tax invoice should always carry dynamic QR code. Now one may ask, what is the content? We have seen the content of dynamic QR code. What is the content of PRN? The contents of PRN will be the transaction ID, date and time of payment, If it is by way of cash, other than cash, these will be the transaction. If it is by way of cash, it will be just date and time and amount, If it is on by other than by way of cash, it is by other than way of cash means debit card, credit card, net banking, etc., then it will be having transaction ID plus date and time plus even amount. So these are all the points that are being clarified by the circular. All these points are being clarified by the circular. Rather, even mode will be there. One more point I have missed out. Even mode of payment will be there. So what is meant by payment reference number? If the payment is by way other than by way of cash, then please you will get the transaction ID. The moment you make the payment by way of debit card, credit card or net banking, you will get the transaction ID, date and time, amount and the mode of payment. If it is by way of cash, simple, date and time and amount. It is by way of cash, you have to mention that, and date and time and amount is more than sufficient. So all these points are given here. So this is all about issue number 3 we have discussed in our understanding. Even issue number 4 we have discussed with that particular understanding. Issue number 5 is also discussed. So issue number 3, 4, 5 basically are the same. If at all it is prepayment, always supplier has the option of giving only the payment reference number. If the payment is by way of cash, you have to just give the date and amount, date and amount of cash that you have received. Amount. When is the amount that you have received and along with the date. If it is by way of other than cash, then you have to give the transaction ID, date and time, give the amount, give the mode of payment. All these details has to be given if it is by way of other than cash. So issue number 3, 4 and 5 revolves around the same thing. Now the last issue, friends, which is there. Now last issue is very peculiar issue. It tells that if you are supplying by way of electronic commerce operator, and for both of you your dynamic QR code is applicable. Should you generate dynamic QR code once or twice? Which means you are talking about a scenario where you are the supplier, you are supplying goods or services through electronic commerce operator to the end consumer. That supplies by way of electronic commerce operator. Right, and when you talk about that particular supply, understand that payment will be actually made by the end consumer to ECO, who in turn will deduct his commission, and remit the balance amount. Now, supply is through ECO. Supply is through ECO. Supply is through ECO. Now, payment will be made by end consumer to ECO. Payment will be made, say for example 10,000 plus GST payment is made, and ECO will deduct its commission, plus GST and remit the balance, to the supplier. So, supposing the sale is for 10,000 plus GST, this is supply by supplier to end consumer, but this payment will be received by the ECO, who will deduct its commission and GST, who is going to deduct, and the balance amount will be given to the supplier. Now the question is, payment is made only once. Now, supplier will give tax invoice. Supplier will give tax invoice to the end consumer. So, supplier will raise tax invoice. To whom? To the end consumer. And this ECO will raise tax invoice to the supplier for its commission. ECO will raise tax invoice to the ECO for its commission. But understand that this payment is made by, this 10,000 plus GST is made by, end consumer to ECO, who will deduct its commission plus GST and remit the balance to supplier. So, end consumer will pay 10,000 plus GST to the ECO. ECO will deduct its commission plus GST and it will remit balance to the supplier. Now the question came whether dynamic QR code is required by both. Yes, it said that dynamic QR code, supplier has to go with the concept of dynamic QR code. For the supplier, dynamic QR code will be applicable, as well as for the ECO. Dynamic QR code will be applicable. For both of them, dynamic QR code provision is applicable. For both of them, dynamic QR code facility is available. Even if ECO is giving the facility of dynamic, you see, what will happen is ECO will give the facility to the end consumer to make the payment. So, ECO is already giving this facility. So, they are trying to tell that for both of them, dynamic QR code is applicable. Both for supplier it is applicable, as well as electronic commerce operator it is applicable. Though the payment has come, see, understand why electronic commerce operator will give that facility of dynamic QR code, because payment is coming through it. So, electronic commerce operator has to generate dynamic QR code because payment is coming through ECO. So, ECO has to give the facility of digital payment to the end consumer, as well as supplier. For supplier it is actually applicable. Supplier, though it is not receiving the payment directly, but even for supplier it has to go with the concept of dynamic QR code. See, both are following dynamic QR code for two different reasons. Supplier has to give dynamic QR code because it is B2C. Transaction. ECO has to go with dynamic QR code because it is going to get the payment. It is going to receive the payment. So, for both of them, the objective is different. Why does supplier is required to have dynamic QR code on its invoice? Because it is B2C transaction. Why does ECO has to put dynamic QR code on its invoice? Because though ECO has got nothing to do with end consumer, no transaction, no contract with end consumer, after all ECO is going to get the payment. So, ECO has to go with the concept of dynamic QR code. So, logic of both going with the facility of dynamic QR code is different. Logic of both giving the facility of dynamic QR code is different. ECO has to give it because it is going to get the payment, though it is not having any contract or any kind of sales with end consumer. It is going to receive the payment. So ECO has to give the facility of dynamic QR code. Supplier has to give because section tells that it is B2C transaction, and for B2C dynamic QR code is applicable. So this is how you have to understand. So that is the last part of this particular circular. Right, friends, the next amendment in your document chapter is all about your HSN, harmonized system of nomenclature. How many digits should be there? So from 1st of April 2021, from your 1st of April 2021, what has happened is the number of digits of HSN on your documentation has changed. Not only on documentation but also on your GSTR1 has changed. How many digits of HSN you should give on your invoices, that is documentation, as well as how many digits of HSN should be there in your while filing your GSTR1. Now what are they trying to tell? Previously the limit was different. Right, certain people not required, certain people 2 digits, certain people 4 digits. Now they have changed it. If your annual aggregate turnover in preceding financial year is less than or equal to 5 crores, for B2B 4 digits, for B2C optional. You make, if you want you can give 4 digits, but it is optional. But if your aggregate turnover in preceding financial year is more than 5 crores, B2B or B2C, 6 digits. B2B or B2C, it is 6 digits. So previously the number of digits on your number of digits of HSN on your tax invoice and other document, not only tax invoice, on all the types of documentation, as well as your GSTR1 was a different concept. Certain people not required, certain people 2, certain people 4. Now they have thoroughly changed. They have said that totally, previously it was for one category not required, for other category 2 digits, for other category it is 4. Now they have totally changed it. So I have to see my previous year aggregate turnover, and if I see my previous year aggregate turnover is up to 5 crores, more than 5 crores, if at all it is up to 5 crores, B2B, B2C, more than 5 crores, B2B, B2C, up to 5 crores, if it is B2B, mandatory 4 digits. If it is B2C, it is not required. If you want, you can put any number of digits, optional, which means it is not at all required. It is not at all required. If I want, I can go with 4 digits, otherwise it is not at all required. Not at all required. Now if my aggregate turnover in preceding financial year, so this is my aggregate turnover in preceding financial year, is more than 5 crores, whether it is B2B or B2C, I should have 6 digits on my tax invoice, bill of supply, delivery challan, etc., etc. Also on my GSTR1. Also on my GSTR1. So this is applicable for all the documentation as well as my GSTR1 with effect from 1st of April 2021. With effect from 1st of April 2021. So this is the amendment which is there in your with respect to your HSN. These are the amendments with respect to your documentation chapter. Friends, now let us discuss the amendments in your e-waybill chapter. So when you talk about your e-waybill chapter, there are 2 amendments. One, when you are talking about the validity of e-waybill in terms of section 68, basically you are talking about the validity of your e-waybill. Validity of your e-waybill. The other is with respect to blocking of e-waybills for non-filers. This is with respect to Rule 138E. Rule 138E. Now let us discuss the first amendment, which is a very simple amendment. They wanted to reduce the validity of e-waybill for normal transportation. So we are not talking about transportation by way of over-dimensional cargo or your multimodal shipment in which at least one leg is by way of vessel. So that is special. That is that validity remains the same. We are talking about transportation by normal means. When I tell normal means, it is other than over-dimensional cargo, other than multimodal shipment, where at least one leg involves transportation by ship. So we are talking about normal category. We are talking about normal category. What is special category? Special category is a case where you are talking about over-dimensional cargo, which can be seen only in your highways. You cannot find them in cities. Over-dimensional cargo, a lengthy truck will be there, where multiple dimensions of the truck will be there. Second is multimodal shipment. Multimodal shipment means part transportation is by way of road, part is by way of vessel, part is by way of rail, etc. So multimodal shipment, but with the condition at least one leg of the transportation is by way of vessel. At least one leg is by way of vessel. So if it is multimodal shipment, where one part of the leg is road and other part is rail, it will come under normal cargo. It will be coming under normal category. So here understand that when I tell normal and special, if I am talking about multi-dimensional cargo, special. If I am talking about multi-dimensional cargo, or you can call it as over-dimensional cargo, which will be seen only on highways and it will go with a lesser speed. If I am talking about multimodal shipment, where one leg is by way of vessel. If I am talking about multimodal shipment, where no leg is by way of vessel, which means it may be partly by road, partly by rail, partly by air, but nothing by vessel. Others. So you can categorize this into 4. So if it is over dimensional cargo or multimodal shipment where at least one leg is by way of vessel, it will require some extra time. This comes under special category, where for every 20 kilometers, you get 1 day or part thereof. Every 20 kilometers or part thereof, you get 1 day. When I am talking about multimodal shipment, but no leg is by way of vessel, nothing is by way of vessel, it may is partly by road, partly by rail, or partly by rail, partly by air, etc. Or others categories, it will come in general category, not in special category, it will come in general category, where earlier it was 100 kilometers or part thereof. It was 100 kilometers or part thereof. It was 1 day. Now what they have done, this 100 kilometers or part thereof, they have changed it as 200 kilometers or part thereof. So they are telling that earlier for every 100 kilometers or part thereof you had 1 day. Now for 200 kilometers or part thereof you will have 1 day. So which means I am talking about a general category. The amendment is there only in general category. Earlier for a general category, general case, if the transportation, say it was 998 kilometers. So earlier the validity was, rather than 998, we will take it as 918 kilometers. So earlier I had how much time? 10 days time. Before amendment it was 10 days. Now my validity is only 5 days. Now after amendment my validity is only 5 days. Why? Because for every 200 kilometers or part thereof, there is 1 day. Therefore for 918 kilometers divided by 200, you will get 4 point something. That 4 point something will be equal to 5. Earlier for every 100 kilometers or part thereof, you had 1 day, which means earlier it was 918 divided by 100, you had 9.18, which is nothing but 10. But now after the amendment you are not going to go with 10. After the amendment your validity is reduced. After the amendment, before the amendment, for this 918 kilometers it would have been 10 days, but after the amendment it is 5 days. This is for a general category. There's no amendment in special category. When you talk about over dimensional cargo or multimodal shipment where at least one leg is by way of vessel, the validity remains the same. So amendment is only and only in general category, only and only in your general category. When I am talking about general category, it is neither over dimensional cargo, neither multimodal shipment where one leg involves vessel. So it is not covered by either. So it is a general, it is not covered in special cases, it is a general category example. So that is the first amendment. Right, validity of e-waybill, it has changed for normal category or general category. Now the next amendment is in rule 138E, which is blocking of e-waybill. Blocking of e-waybill for non-filers. So when you are talking about if you are not filing your returns, e-waybill cannot be generated whether inward e-waybill or outward e-waybill. Whether inward e-waybill or outward e-waybill cannot be generated if you are not filing your returns. Now there are certain amendments there For a composition taxable person, this provision will be applicable. Earlier, it was mentioned as for 2 consecutive tax periods. Now they have clearly mentioned that 2 consecutive quarters, because tax period was causing confusion, because composition taxable person, they filed CMP 08 for quarterly payment and GSTR 4 for yearly return. So that was causing some confusion whether you have to take this as year or quarter. Now they have clearly said that for composition taxable person, you have to take 2 consecutive quarters. I am telling the logic, the reasoning was when they have mentioned two consecutive tax period, there was a confusion whether to go with quarters or to go with year, because CMP 08 is on quarterly basis payment and GSTR 4 yearly filing is on annual basis, yearly basis. So now to avoid that confusion, they have clearly said that you have to focus on quarterly CMP 08. If they are not filing their quarterly CMP 08 for 2 consecutive quarters, they will not be in a position to generate e-way bill, whether it is inward e-way bill or outward e-way bill. For other than composition taxable person, for persons other than composition taxable person, which means we are talking about regular taxable person, casual taxable person, non-resident taxable person. Now, what was amendment? When you talk about regular taxable person and casual taxable person, they file GSTR 3B and GSTR 1. So for GSTR 1, it was said that they are not filing GSTR 1 for 2 consecutive months or 2 consecutive quarters. 2 consecutive months or quarters, because one can be filed on monthly basis as well as quarterly basis. For 3B, it was mentioned as 2 consecutive months. It was mentioned as 2 consecutive months, which is wrong, because now GSTR 3B also can be filed on monthly basis or quarterly basis. So to correct that, they have removed that months and they have added as tax periods. They have added as tax. Now you may have said that why they have added tax period, because GSTR 3B now it can be filed on monthly basis or quarterly basis. There is one more person called as your NRTP, who is going to file GSTR 5. He is always going to file GSTR file on monthly basis. So to avoid or to remove that ambiguity, to remove that mismatch, they have corrected it. So they have not corrected it for GSTR 1, because GSTR 1 was written right very correctly, whether 2 consecutive months or quarters, both are covered. But GSTR 3B, it was mentioned as only 2 consecutive months. But now, after introduction of QRMP scheme, 3B can be filed on monthly basis or quarterly basis. Therefore, they have written as 2 consecutive tax periods. And whereas when you talk about GSTR 5 by NRTP, it is always on monthly basis, so 2 consecutive months. You have to read it as 2 consecutive months. Plus, they have added one more point in this 138E. It is applicable for any person, whether he is a composition taxable person or a regular taxable person or a casual taxable person or an NRTP, whose registration has been suspended in terms of Rule 21A1, Rule 21A2 or Rule 21A2A. So if you have a simple language, there are only 3 cases of suspension: 21A1, 21A2, 21A2A. If at all your registration is suspended, e-way bill, whether it is inward or outward, cannot be generated. So if I were to summarize this, if at all you are talking about the summarization of this, whether you talk about your, here first category you are talking about composition taxable person. Second category, here you are talking about regular taxable person, casual taxable person. Third category, you are talking about NRTP. Composition taxable person not filing CMP 08 for 2 consecutive quarters. Regular taxable person, casual taxable person not filing GSTR 3B for 2 consecutive tax period, means months or quarters as the case may be, or not filing GSTR 1 for 2 consecutive months or quarters as the case may be. So for regular taxable person and casual taxable person, if at all he has not filed GSTR 3B for 2 consecutive months or quarters, he is not in a position to generate e-way bill, whether inward or outward. Or if he has filed 3B but he has not filed GSTR 1 for 2 consecutive months or quarters, even then his e-way bill will be blocked. For NRTP, he has not filed GSTR 5 for 2 consecutive for 2 consecutive months. So if you are talking about composition taxable person not filing CMP 08 for 2 consecutive quarters, NRTP not filing GSTR 5 2 consecutive months. Now special point is all about regular taxable person and casual taxable person. Not filing GSTR 3B for 2 consecutive months or quarters, or there is a point called as or, which means you are either covered by the first point or the second point, not filing GSTR 1 for 2 consecutive months or quarters. If at all you are covered by either, you are not in a position to generate e-waybill, whether it is inward e-waybill or outward e-waybill. Now the second point, this is the first point, the second difference is common to all. The second difference is common to all. What is that second difference? If your registration is suspended, whether under Rule 21 capital A1 or Rule 21 capital A2 or Rule 21 capital A2A, if your registration is suspended, forget about whether you're composition taxable person or regular taxable person or casual taxable person or NRTP. The moment your registration is suspended, you're not in a position to generate e-waybill. So here it is all about non-filing. Here it was all about non-filing of returns. Here it is about suspension of registration. If you are covered by either, then you will not be in a position to generate e-waybill, not only for your outward supplies but also for your inward supplies, which means for your inward supplies you are not going to generate e-waybill. The opposite party is going to generate e-waybill. But when he is sending the goods to you, if you are a non-filer, even he is not in a position to generate e-waybill because you are non-filer. So when the supplier has or the recipient is a non-filer, e-waybill cannot be generated. Either the supplier or the recipient, if he is a non-filer, either the supplier, either the consignor, you can call it as the consignor or the consignee, rather than calling it as supplier recipient. In e-waybill you can call it as consignor consignee. If at all consignor or consignee, if at all I tell that consignor, consignor is non-filer, consignee is proper filer, consignor is proper filer, consignee is non-filer, consignor is proper filer, consignee is proper filer, but registration is suspended. Consignor is proper filer but registration is suspended. Consignee is also proper filer. Both consignor is proper filer as well as consignee is proper filer. So these are all the permutation combinations. In all the first 4 cases, e-waybill cannot be generated. Whosoever is generating it cannot be generated. Only in the last case e-waybill can be generated. If you find a non-filer anywhere or suspension of registration anywhere, e-waybill cannot be generated. Only and only in a scenario where you are a proper filer and there is no suspension of registration, both consignor as well as consignee, e-waybill can be generated. So that is all about the amendments which are there in your e-waybills.